this video for the first time, what I'm doing is I'm restoring a 100-year-old apple press, and we're starting with the two press barrels. Here you can see the old one made out of oak has been sitting outside and deteriorated and is in pretty bad shape. Here is the replacement. The only part that I reused were the steel hoops. The screws and the white oak, everything else is brand new. So I'll go through the process of how I took it apart and where I came up with the material and how it went back together again. So the tricky thing with this old barrel is that it was riveted together. I talked to my father-in-law last night. He's an antiques dealer, and he said that this was probably well over 100 years old. And you can tell by a lot of the hardware. So we've got these rivets in there, and the problem is getting them out to secure these, to extricate these hoops. I thought about grinding them, but then I would mar the outside of the ring, and I don't want to see that. And then I thought about maybe grinding them from the inside, and that's kind of difficult to get to. So what I came up with is simply using a cold chisel and splitting out the wood. The first one's a little bit tricky to get out, but once you get the first piece out, it's pretty simple. So I found I split from the top and then flip it over. Now that I've liberated the hoops from the oak stays, we can work on the rivets. And as a side note, or a benefit I guess, I won't be cutting kindling for a couple days. But if you guys don't have access, or own an anvil, you can make do with a piece of railroad track like this. And you'll find these at the garage sales all the time. Amateur blacksmiths and guys for years have been using railroad tie as an impromptu anvil, and it just works great for little projects like this. So if you do see one, be sure and pick it up. So now all these rivets, what we want to do is we want to pound these out so they're facing out, so we can get a bite on them with our pliers. Now with the rivets out of the hoop, we'll take it over to the media blaster and clean it up. So here I want to show you the before and after it goes through the media blaster. The media blaster is just a fancy name for a sand blaster, but I don't use sand. You can use sand, but there's lots of different products you can use depending on what you're working on. Aluminum oxide, if you have as a powder form, you want a material that's softer, that's what you're spraying on what you're trying to clean is softer, so it minimizes the damage. This here is not a showpiece, so it doesn't matter so much, but what I found to be the best is glass beads. It's just really fine small glass beads, and it's good at taking things off. Some people that are really into delicate restoration will use, I think they use baking soda or baking powder. I've seen some people use nutshells, but for me glass beads seems to be kind of an good all-purpose, but it really does a good job of cleaning this off and prepping it for paint. There's a little bit of pitting in here, but as I said, we're not building a piano here, so it will be more than adequate. So I'll show you how and where I got the wood and how we'll go ahead and rip those strips. So the individual pieces that we're using are, as far as I know, they're either white or red oak. I'm not real sure. I'm not a wood expert. They are definitely oak. Need to be about 1.25 inches across and 5/8 in thickness. So what I found, or what I'm using, is scavenging around in one of the old barns. There's were several bundles of this solid oak flooring, and it's really nice because it's clear. When I use the word clear, what that means is it doesn't have any knots in it. Knots are really a weakness. They don't look good, and they're really a weakness in the board. When you look at a knot in a piece of framing material, whatever, it looks like there's something there that would help hold, but look at it as a hole in the wood, because that's essentially what it is, because it will dry and crack and fall out. So when you see a knot, that is really a sign of weakness in wood. So what I had to do with this, what we're trying to end up with is small pieces like this. The problem is you can see that there's a lot of beveling in the bottom of this. We don't want that. So we'll take the table saw and we'll rip off the tongue and groove flooring, and rip this to widths, and then we'll turn it over and then rip it down on the side and get a nice flat surface and end up with these nice pieces that are 12 1/4 long. Now over here at the table saw, first thing we're going to do is rip off the tongue. This is not going to do us any good, so we'll set the fence on our saw over to just skim that off of there, and we'll have a nice straight edge. Now you can see we got a nice clean edge there we can work with, and what we're going to do is we're going to set our fence now to 1.25 inches for our strips, because that's the width. Now when I cut these things, this is a pretty small strip. As you can see, we'll run the oak through here. This is the piece that I want. I don't dig on having my hand that close to the table saw blade. So one thing you can do is you can buy, but you could just make one. It's just a little handle right there. You'll see it's got a notch in the back. And what I do is I use this. It keeps my hand well out of the way of the table saw blade, and I use it to push the wood through. As you can see, this little step on there, the heel, will hook on the back of the board. And then as I'm running it through, I can use this. And this is the sacrificial lamb here that gets next to the blade, not my hand. So this is a very good thing to have. Now that we've got our width ripped to 1.25 inches, you can see right there that bevel in there. We don't want that. We want a nice square piece. So the maximum amount of wood we can get out of here with a square piece is 5/8. So what I'll do is we'll set the fence here to 5/8. Rotate this 90 degrees from our initial cut, and then we'll cut out that little bevel. The table saw is one of the most versatile tools. I could do this whole project with just saw alone. It not only can you rip, but you can cross cut by using this attachment, which will come with all table saws. Not only that, but you can cut so many at one time in large material. So now that we've got our dimensions set, we're going to need to cut this to length. And I could use the chop saw by doing this, or I could use the table saw and do several at one time, and it's actually faster. So our length is 12.5. So now that we've got our oak pieces cut, we've got to sand them. Traditionally, I think what most people use are the electric dual action or jitterbug, not a jitterbug, but a dual action DA type of sander, which moves in multiple directions, the electric ones. I find these to be pretty good, but they're hard to control. What works so much better, and I don't know why the this is exclusive to the auto body industry, but is a DA or dual action pneumatic sander, like you use a professional one like on auto body. It is so much more controllable, it's so much nicer to use, and the discs are much cheaper because you buy them in such quantity, I think, because the auto body guys go through so much, but you can buy them in these rolls and they just have adhesive on them. And they stick on here. And the sandpaper seems to be of a higher grade. It's just much nicer to use. So if you do have an air compressor, I would highly recommend it. So as I said, there's 29 of these pieces in each barrel. So do I want to go and lay out each individual one? That would be very time consuming. So what I've done in my drill press here is just set up a simple jig with a small drill bit to put a pilot hole in there that will put the exact same hole in the exact same place every time. So now I've got my pieces all marked, the holes, pilot holes in them, and loop blasted. We can go ahead and start putting these together. And I'm just using, we'll see how it works. I'm just using these little stainless steel screws. And I simply line up the hole. I like to put these in by hand because sometimes with a drill you can over tighten it and strip them out. And that's it. The first one's in place. And repeat that about 29 times, twice. What's 29 plus 2 or times 2, Jack?
29 times 2. 30.
58.
58.
58 times. That's it. So if you keep that up, you will eventually end up with this right there. So let's get to work, Jack.
Yeah. Whoa. It just doesn't get any more dangerous than that.